everyone. I'm joined with Ty Martin here, our SVP of Technology at LQ Digital. And I am excited today as we are going to talk about a topic that is pretty big here, which is AI and how do we actually integrate AI to make organizations move faster. I feel like we're hearing a lot of things about how AI can help a marketing organization, how it makes agencies go faster, how it might make agencies extinct. And it's something Ty and I have been spending a lot of time on. And I think from that, there's a few kind of key hidden pitfalls we've been learning about how do you integrate AI into your marketing organization and how to solve them. And we thought it's always better to learn from others and others' mistakes and others' challenges. So why not spend a little bit of time talking through everything we've learned in the past 6 months of working together? It's hard to believe it's only been 6 months with all the,
Yeah,
the
right.
work we've been doing,
Time flies both in work and in AI.
right? 6 months is a lifetime ago in AI, it feels
No.
like. So kind of on that, Ty, I thought we'd kick us off with a little bit of, what are we even trying to do when we use AI in marketing? What are some of the biggest use cases that you're seeing kind of for marketing teams who are leveraging AI before we go into how you get it there?
Yeah,
It's kind of what should
absolutely.
you be using it for?
Right? Because it changes week by week. Things that we weren't capable of last week, suddenly this week is the week. So the
Exactly.
ways that, I've seen teams using it most frequently, and when I say teams, I'm referring to internal embedded teams at
Yeah.
our clients, as well as teams at agencies, which counts for our team. We have a AI orchestration platform called LQ Brain, which we built through a combination of third party plus in-house engineering. And then also just have my finger on the pulse of my colleagues at other agencies and, how are things going there? And, I break down the most common use cases into about 4 or 5 categories. So it's research, automation, generation, meaning production of assets, and then data analysis. And to just put a pin on each one of them, when I say research, like it's most commonly been things like target customer research. And what are our competitors doing? Have they
Hmm.
suddenly released something that cannibalizes our messaging and means that we need to change it? And this comes from both the web searches that AI can do, but we found it also critical to connect to bespoke sources of
Yeah.
research, performing queries in SEMrush and other sorts of really highly controlled research tools is really valuable.
Essentially better data in, better output.
Yeah, you got it. That's right. And then when it comes to automation, teams are looking to save time, right? Spend more time on strategy, less time on monotony.
Yeah.
And so the kinds of examples that I see most commonly there are things like turning meeting transcripts into assigned action items. Summarizing everyone's daily tasks to where it's really clear when one gets in the morning what are we going to work on in that morning. And when it comes to like generating assets, producing assets, many teams are using this for copywriting now, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a gray area because it's a little bit, yet to be seen how copyright plays out when it comes to being generated by AI. But for things where copyright is not of critical importance, then it is generally becoming acceptable to use an output from an AI for straight up social ads, straight up search ads. And those have been performing super well because, as you know, these days it's all about velocity,
Yeah.
right? That how many assets can we test in a short period of time?
But I think kind of that brings an interesting point in terms of velocity and when it works well, because it's something like a creative ad, right? There, you don't have a lot of real estate. And if you have well-trained AI with the right guidelines, the right about your brand, like it can learn from all of the data you have in it. And I think that really makes sense. I think we have seen it kind of go a little bit awry when we've been handed creative from clients that you could tell was very much used with AI
Right.
that gets a little bit more generic or maybe starts to lose the product a little bit because maybe it wasn't quite so well trained. So I think that's a good point of kind of when it can work really well if you set it up the right way.
Right.
Or,
Right.
we had to go rewrite some of it.
Yeah, and you
Like this,
talked
they
about
won't get it.
narrowing things down, which reminds me of just another amazing use case for AI is pressure testing messaging before it goes out
Yeah.
into the public. And so that refers to that, we'll sometimes create a digital twin of our target customer set
Yes.
that is aware of their motivations and pain points and all that, and then point that at a bunch of copy that we all think is pretty good,
Yeah.
and then narrow it down from there.
Exactly. You can suddenly have all these personas living in your agents,
Mhm.
and you don't need to only go wait for the data. You can take the data you've had and use it to learn faster and faster and hopefully weed out some of the duds before you ever get there.
Yep. Yeah, you got it. So that is the production aspect of it. And then the last one I want to talk about as far as primary use cases is around data analysis. And I mean, that's, I'd say, one of the toughest nuts to crack, but also one of the just biggest time savings that we've seen.
Yeah.
And it is something that you can crack that nut. So what I'm talking about are things like from the basics, just some teams are uploading spreadsheets, right? And then using AI to analyze which creative concepts are resonating, that kind of data analysis. But it gets super powerful when you use it for more advanced workflows. Like,
Right.
we have an offering called LQ Lens where we're capable of analyzing thousands and thousands of telephone calls and emails and chats that happen between our client brand and their prospective customers and learn from that, like the
Yeah.
world's largest focus group, you
Right.
know?
Which is
Yeah.
super powerful. Like I remember the first kind of pilots you guys were doing, some of the insights that were coming out were not at all what we were expecting, right? We had hypotheses as to why things weren't working, and it turned out there was a lot more nuance in the data, and they were able to do some pretty cool things as a result. But I feel like data analysis is one of the ones that I hear a lot of conflicting feelings on from people. And so I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on this before we move on, which is, I've heard some clients literally tell their teams only use it to tie together data, don't use it to analyze. And I've heard others in the market who are like, I can do everything with AI and you don't need an analyst anymore. So kind of where do you think that truth lies in
Yeah,
between
totally.
what you should let it do?
Yeah, I mean, so it's certainly capable of accurate data analysis, and it is still important to have a practitioner who's overseeing it. So
Right.
it's still about human in the loop. It's still about having some validation that what you're viewing is accurate. But what we found is that we're reaching close to 100% accuracy with a few different projects that have made that accuracy reach that. Like, for example, if you're pointing any of these AI tools at a data warehouse, right?
Yeah.
Then what they're doing is they're generally converting your conversational text to SQL queries that perform the appropriate data pulls.
And
And
that's something we've been
sometimes,
using
yeah,
for decades, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And sometimes that can get confused. You can be watching the thinking of the AI, and the AI is out there saying, well, the data warehouse has a field called clicks, and it's got a field called max clicks. And you asked for what our click traffic is like, so I'm not quite sure which of these you're wanting me to look at. And so the solution to that is really around annotating the schema of the data warehouse, which means putting a line of text next to, say, the max clicks field that says, this is our official source of truth for
Yeah.
click traffic. And the AI learns that and immediately gives you better accuracy.
So it's really about how do you set it up for foundationally so that it can be successful. Spend
Yeah.
more time getting it there so that you can then save kind of ongoing time from all the teams. But it sounds
Yeah.
like obviously there's the research examples, which we had all kind of been seeing for a few years now, right? Sourcing information, but really where a lot of the kind of wins are is from taking these processes that used to take a long amount of time and just getting the insights to teams' hands faster so then they can do what they can do best, which is the thinking.
Time to insight.
Yeah,
That's my charter. Yeah.
I like it. So, kind of with the whole time to insight concept, what do you think are some of the challenges that marketing teams run into when trying to increase that time to insight, especially when they're starting with AI?
Yeah, totally. And I'd say that it breaks into like some of them are team related challenges and some of them are technology related challenges, right?
Yep.
So it's things like team members can be reluctant. Team members can lack the right expertise, right? Um, Team members can be burned sometimes by pulling information that ends up being a hallucination or ends
Yeah.
up being some inaccuracy. And then also compliance, right, is another big challenge. So, kind of taking a couple of those one by one, when it comes to reluctant team members, a lot of the times I found that it's about just giving them a taste of something
I
tangible,
agree.
right? So maybe not, they're not going to be the ones to go in and immediately create an agent themselves, but if you can have your marketing engineer, which is something I recommend, having at least one or two people on your team who have trained up on the end-to-end process of building these sorts of tools, then have that person create immediate value for anyone reluctant to jump in. And I've seen that overnight, they're like,
I
bring
think
it.
I think that's a huge one because I feel like that's something we struggled with quite a bit at the beginning, right? Like people are like, sure, whatever.
Right,
I'll take a chat, I'll license. I'm just gonna go query like some, I'll ask it instead of Google. And we're like, no, that's not what we're trying to accomplish here. But then suddenly you guys started building agents and just enrolling people in it and showing it to them. One or two kind of saves, and suddenly they're believers, right? Wait a minute, this used to take me hours and I just did it in minutes. Now I can go do the things that actually matter with it, right? That
right,
I think really started to drive people who maybe used to be kind of slow adopters to become
right.
some of our advocates here.
Yeah, that's what I've seen as well. And then, when it comes to the expertise that's required for this, it's a mixed bag when it comes to what kind of knowledge is necessary here. Depends on how advanced you're trying to get, but at the very least, it requires knowledge of things like OAuth, which is an authentication protocol, because so much of laying that foundation of AI is making the proper secure connections between all of these different sources of information and data. And so it's necessary to know what a client secret is, know how, a temp token works. And those are all totally within reach. For example, Anthropic's training is a wonderful training series that can get a lot of people just immediately up to speed on
Hmm.
this kind of thing. And, the other thing that I want to highlight is the concept of MCP servers. That's the other thing that anyone working in this is going to need to understand. And it's totally within reach for any level of technical kind of a user. Um, it's just the way that these tools communicate with each other in this modern AI protocol. And it's been huge for us. We've connected hundreds of different MCPs, and that's what gives us a lot of our wonderful intelligence.
Yes, which I think is like it's understandable. You can figure it out. It's not the craziest thing, which A, I think you have one camp that wants to make it sound like some mystery science that only they know. But then B, I think you have another camp that wants to sound like you just hit a button and everyone can be replaced. So I do think it's interesting because it can save a huge amount of time, but I am saying that there's other time we have to invest instead, right? Like it's different resources, it's different people to get that foundation to go really fast. And I say that because, I saw a friend post today, like small businesses, what are you doing? Like, what are your questions with AI? And I do feel like there could probably a lot of people who are kind of overwhelmed by it, but I think that's where this Anthropic and these other trainings you're mentioning kind of can help organizations figure out where to start if you don't have a huge kind of tech team to go rely on. I get you and your team, so it's easy for us, but for
Right.
others, they don't have
Yeah,
such a
and
great
to
place
be
to start.
honest, we do get the opportunity to just go more elevated than your average team by virtue of having in-house software engineering. It's
Exactly.
so common to run into gaps here where it's like, well, the solution here is to write a custom script
Yeah.
or to,
Yeah.
cut it. So it does help if you do have those sorts of resources available.
Yeah, no, we were lucky enough to have a pretty big tech team for an agency that we could
Yeah.
rely on to go put at this. And I think that's definitely, I'm aware that that's been a key to the success for sure.
Yeah.
With that in mind, kind of what do you think are some of the key components, right? Because we're building, like talking about success, we went from
Yeah.
mm, probably a year and a half ago now when it was like, hey, let's use Perplexity and ChatGPT. Have you heard of these things? To a year ago where it's like, look, ChatGPT for all. We have our own workspace. To today where we have our own agentic platform and brain, an LQ brain that is way beyond any one kind of platform. We have unique things built across for every client, and it's just gotten, so much more complex. So when people are kind of going at that level of, an AI brain, what do you think matters then?
Yeah, and this is another one that just breaks really cleanly into like the technical components and then the organizational components. Because again, both of those have the foundations have to be in place. And a lot of times teams have decision paralysis because there's a lot of choices and it changes week to week which of them is optimal. And so, part of the answer is everything. Don't silo oneself into
Yeah.
just one platform or model. It's important to architect your AI ecosystem in a way that has portability because the solution that's best now, not likely to be the best one or the most cost-effective one in 3 to 6 months. So, when it comes to the specific components on the technical side of things, I think of it as about basically five different pieces that comprise your organization's AI brain. And so that breaks down into the AI orchestration platform, like a ChatGPT, except I'll explain in a moment why that's maybe shooting a little lower than
Yeah.
what most organizations should be shooting for. And then the actual AI models to be used, the connections to form, the agents to create, and lastly, the skills to empower those agents. And so what that means is, when I talk about the AI platform, the most common ones that I see marketing teams engage with are essentially off-the-shelf ChatGPT.com and
Hmm.
Claude.ai, right?
Yep.
Or Claude Cowork or any of these other flavors of it. And that's totally powerful. But meanwhile, there's an elevated level that gives even more control and just even more extensibility, and so that's what we've built internally is what we call LQ Brain, which is I describe it as like a chat GPT on steroids that just, or I should say, a supercharged version of
Yeah.
chat GPT. Because it kind of gives our team members like a bionic suit to where, they're still in the loop,
Yeah.
but they are just powered by an enormous amount of strength and skill that is not something that we had a year ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then when it comes to the AI model, don't just choose one, choose multiple. It's really common within our workflows to use two AI models, say a ChatGPT and a Claude, all within the same workflow because you play them off of each other.
Yeah.
You get one response from one, and then you say, hey, I want a second opinion from this other model. And they begin speaking to each other and come to the best possible response in that fashion.
Absolutely. Get much stronger results from and prevent a lot of hallucinations.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And then let's talk connections, right? So when I say connections, I'm talking about sources of knowledge. So it's critical to form secure connections to your storage drives, your Google Drives, your Microsoft SharePoint, etc. Um, and then it's also critical to form connections to the tools that you tend to use. Like, for example, we use Monday.com as
Yeah.
one of our internal tools, things like project management. And so our tool is set up to automatically create tasks for us in Monday or find what tasks are open and in need of service and put that right in front of the correct team member in Slack as a reminder. So anyways, forming those connections to tools and to sources of knowledge is the next key component. And then taking the second to last, which is agents. A lot of people are not totally sure what an agent is, right? It's kind of an esoteric thing.
This hype word everyone talks about, but no one and nods saying
Right,
yes,
right. And
but
plus,
maybe
there's a lot of chatter around something being an agent that's not actually an agent. And so one of the differentiators that I use onto is something really what I would call an agent is it capable of reasoning and then acting and then repeating that back and forth until you have achieved your objective. And that's what I referred to earlier when I was saying that sometimes it's not sure whether it should be looking at clicks or max clicks. It's critical that you're using an agentic architecture that enables it to notice that those things are at odds with each other and reason on which ones it should go with, act, and then reason and act until you've achieved your objective.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And and then the last thing around skills you can think of as workflows that are predefined. It's essentially just another set of instructions, but the difference between this set of instructions and your agent instructions are things that you want it to always know and always act upon every single time that you use the service. Whereas a skill is built for point solutions, meaning it's built for really specific use cases that may only come up every once in a while. Like it may be that, hey, our team is looking to onboard a new employee. And so that only happens every so often. It
Right.
wouldn't make sense to put the whole workflow for onboarding a new employee into the master instructions because it bloats the size of the instructions and bloats the size of the context in a way that can make it less likely for it to obey all
Yeah.
of those instructions, right? So the solution to that is that you take these compartmentalized workflows and turn them into skills so that the agent can make its own decision in real time and say, oh, users saying that we want to onboard a new employee. I've got a skill that's built specifically for that. I'm going to pull that context into our conversation right now because it's precisely what we need in order to accomplish the user's objective.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And getting all this stuff in place is totally within reach of in-house marketing teams, other agencies. And, it takes a lot of architectural decisions, but we've been really, really happy with where we've landed on all of
Yeah.
this architecture.
Yes, we
Yeah.
really have. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think to your point, I think architecture is a good word for it because there was a lot of planning and a lot of design before creating the first rounds that were a little bit more create then think, didn't quite do the same. So I feel like we've talked a lot about kind of the components that are needed, what it is. Let's go to kind of the challenges that people can face. What are some of the pitfalls and how do you maybe create solutions ahead of time to those pitfalls?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the pitfalls I see is that teams will often end up with deliverables that are inconsistent. And when I say deliverables, I'm saying PDFs, slide
Yeah.
presentations, docs, like all of
Yeah.
these are super powerful to be working on and creating with AI, but every individual and every conversation can result in a different format, a different look
Oh,
and
yes,
feel.
I've seen that.
Yeah, totally. But this is easy to solve, which is going back to the concept of skills. What I recommend is that teams create a skill called your design guide. And that at the very least it has your brand book, your
Yeah.
colors and stuff like that. But then you can also give it really specific instructions around how a PDF should look or what branding should be in place. And so that'll usually make a big dent in that
Yeah.
challenge. Another challenge is what I call creation by correspondence versus creation by collaboration.
Hmm.
And what I mean is that a lot of teams are conversing with the AI in a way that is by correspondence. Like, hey, AI, like, let's modify the forecast that we're working on together to do this. And that works okay, but it's not ideal
Yeah.
because when you think about it, the forecast that you're working on is still living in the AI's context. So it's
Yeah.
not quite as transparent and easy to collaborate on as what we found to be really necessary. So instead, what we do is we engage in what I call creation by collaboration, which is that we use the AI to work together on a shared document that we both have eyes on, right?
Yeah, it's essentially kind of the last mile problem in another way, right? I
Yeah.
find that with my own a lot. It's like I can get it to the last mile really quickly and it's hugely helpful, but if you want the AI to get all the way, like it takes me as much time as it did the first 80, 90%, right? So a lot of times that's to your point, then I haven't even thought about it like this. You can just take it and then you get your own ideas. And I also think from a copyright standpoint, from what I've heard, that might be
Hmm.
useful too, right? Suddenly it's your output, but to
Yep.
something you brought up earlier.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. So, other pitfalls that I see a lot of the time is that a lot of teams are using AI agents for processes that are actually super repeatable and not really necessary to be paying the token cost for an AI to reinvent the wheel on
Every
that
time.
process every time, right? A lot of teams, the sort of step-by-step marketing automations have been around for years, and a lot of teams are thinking I should be using AI for almost any step-by-step automation. But no, we've found that it can be both more less expense, but also just more reliable. Because if you're using the AI, there's a lot of decisions that it's making in real time that are not going to be
Right.
consistent turn by turn. Whereas if we're talking about more of a what I call deterministic, meaning a highly regimented workflow, that's almost always going to turn out in a consistent format at an extremely low cost.
And
So
like,
I recommend
yeah,
teams really make a careful decision on which automations you save for AI versus which automations you just use old school
use the
workflows.
right tool for each job, right? It's an
Yeah.
amazing tool, but just because it's the best hammer that's ever existed, it's not going to do something you need a saw to do. That's a terrible analogy, but you get my point, right? It's a fantastic tool, but there's other tools also.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the last one that I would speak about here is around context management. I talked about earlier how important it is to point the AI on precisely the body of information that is relevant for the task at hand.
Hmm.
And meanwhile, if brands are connecting entire Google Drives or entire data warehouses, then that's an enormous amount of context. And AI can sometimes not be sure what's appropriate to pull in or even what should be siloed.
Yeah.
Like we as an ad agency, it's of critical importance that we have 100% separation between different clients, different services, etc. And so, what I recommend that brands do is, again, like really take a careful look at what information are you giving the AI. And what we do is oftentimes we won't rely upon the AI to decide the proper information to look at because that can be subject to confusion, etc. We'll go one level upstream from that
Hmm.
and we'll only provide the AI with specific silos of information that are appropriate for client X or client Y so that there's no chance of any commingling of that because it's
Right.
all 100% separated upstream of the AI and the AI is not making any decisioning between those contextual silos.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So obviously pitfalls, but I feel like, people are learning so fast. And as you mentioned, we've already found ways around them. So kind of with that, thinking back to just where we were a year ago and where we are today, like where do you think it's going?
Right. Yeah, and it's like, where is it going tomorrow? Where is it
Yeah,
going?
tomorrow, in
Like,
2 months.
yeah,
I don't even
can
know what a
I
year will
predict?
be like. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some trends that I think are going to persist and sort of come to a head. And one of those I alluded to a bit earlier, which is the cost effectiveness of everything that we're doing here.
Hmm.
Um, I believe that there will be a huge focus on cost minimization
Oh
over the
yeah.
next several months and years because we've all become addicted to the unlimited usage models at a extremely low price per user. And meanwhile, so many of these solutions are moving towards closer to what it actually costs on the back end in
Yes.
terms of electricity to be running all of this. And so teams are going to get accustomed to paying more than we have been in just the last few months or years, or taking really specific measures to minimize costs. And that can mean things like hosting one's own local AI models instead of
Yeah.
making every external call to
Yeah.
a hosted ChatGPT kind of a model. Um, it also comes in, like I just spoke about, in terms of taking some of your workflows that were being performed by AI and turning them to old school deterministic workflows that don't cost any sort of a token. So that's, I think, one of the going to
Yeah.
be one of the biggest, focuses
I mean, I
going
feel
forward.
like I'm already reading about it. Kind of not only, I know, do we have conversations about it? We definitely are. But kind of lots of people are saying it's not just the absolutely everything, it's this whole token maxing concept, right? And there's
Right.
pretty big bills being hit. And people are thinking out how do we use it a little bit smarter?
Yep.
Well, I know we have just kind of a few minutes left. Any other tips as you think about AI orchestration and really how marketers should be leveraging it that you think people
Yeah,
need
just
to
a
keep in mind?
couple things that have been really huge time savers for our team. One of them is the way that we communicate with our tools. That I find it to be extremely powerful to migrate from typing everything to dictating a
Yes.
large portion of my day. Like, have you been doing that a lot as well?
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, yes. And I've built an agent that's my walk and talk agent so that I don't even have
right.
to be at my desk, right? I wish I had had this 10 years ago and had carpal tunnel. Like, can you imagine how easier life would have been if you, like, back in the day, if I could have dictated or college? Like, it's so much faster. It's great.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that they have to be 100% eloquent or that they have to be succinct. But here's the best kind of voice dictation is you press listen, and then
You spout.
you just begin speaking
Yes.
off the cuff for 5 minutes. Like a lot of my prompts are me speaking for 5 or 7 minutes. And sometimes I'll say something and be like, oh, never mind, I actually meant to say this. And by and large, 99% of the time, it knows exactly what I was trying to communicate when I'm finished with 5 minutes of
I feel
spouting.
like some of my strongest strategies recently have been that same tactic. I spout, and then it's like, this is what you just said. And I'm like, yep,
Right.
that's it. That's what I meant, but I couldn't say it nearly as eloquently. Thank you. Now I have the idea.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And then I think the last thing I want to impart is just around like how do you continually improve these sorts of processes and
Mhm.
systems, right? And, certainly it's important to have a way for team members to communicate their needs to your creators, your marketing engineers. But, it's also how do you know what to tweak in the agent? How do
Yeah,
you know what needs to be changed? And so what I recommend is that any time that you run into something that is not acting the way that you would like, then work with it until it does behave the way that you want. And then say, how can I modify your instructions so that you do this consistently every time in the future? And almost every time you'll get a reply back that says, oh, you know what? You should tweak this part of your original instructions in this particular way. And so by going ahead and making that change, then we're just constantly improving the power and accuracy of all of these tools.
absolutely. I've been seeing those results coming, so I've been watching you live it, so I agree completely. Well, thank you so much, Ty. It's been fun to get to dig in. I feel like we're talking about this a lot, in pieces. It's fun to get to focus on exactly everything that's happening with marketing and AI in a longer conversation. Once again,
Love it.
this is Ty Martin, our SVP of Product and Technology here at LQ Digital, and I'm Monica Niblack, the president of the agency, and we're enjoyed talking to you about AI and how it's impacting marketing these days. Cool.
Have a great rest of your day, Monica.
Thanks, Ty.
Bye.